New reporting in the New York Times makes the case for how the Kakhovka Dam was destroyed, which left surrounding areas flooded and entrenched in water. It reads, why the evidence suggests Russia blew up the dam. The report saying a dam in Ukraine was designed to withstand almost any attack imaginable from the outside. The evidence suggests Russia blew it up from within.
The article continues, moments after the Kakhovka Dam in a, quote, war zone gave way, quote, wild torrents cascaded over the jagged remains of the top, but the real problem most likely lay elsewhere, cloaked deep beneath the surface of the raging waters. Deep inside the dam was an Achilles heel, and because the dam was built during Soviet times, Moscow had every page of the engineering drawings and knew where it was. The report later says that after the destruction, each side blamed the other for the collapse and that multiple explanations are theoretically possible. But, quote, the evidence clearly suggests the dam was crippled by an explosion set off by the side that controls it, Russia.
So previously, it was unclear, but there was reporting to suggest, and this is still the case, that the dam was damaged as part of the war effort by both sides, explosions taking place outside to the structure. You can see that damage. They have some photos in the New York Times of, so the theory was just the accumulation of damage. It eventually gave way. So this admittedly impressive report by the New York Times says that that is not the case. That amount of that damage could not have or would not have been likely to actually breach the dam, but rather an explosion in this inner tunnel underneath the dam that happened at the time that it then broke. And that they have the most compelling evidence being these kind of energy signatures picked up by satellites that to a real exact time for when the dam was destroyed, suggests that that's what happened, and thus it would be Russia that was responsible. I mean, they make it sound like they have interviews with all these people who know about the structural integrity of the dam and how it was built to withstand outside attack. Very impressive. They make it sound like the Death Star, like nothing could take it down except if you fire one projectile into that one little exhaust pipe or whatever, then kaboom.
Yeah, it's a weird send up to Soviet era engineering. Look, I think that it's perfectly possible that this happened.
Sure.
I think it's also possible, and the article acknowledges this. A Professor Beecher, another engineer, says from the article, it was possible, though unlikely, that water flow from the damaged gate somehow undermined the concrete structure where it sat on the riverbed. But he said an examination of the drawings indicated that the design had protected against that possibility with standard measures. So, it's not, so conclusive as to be dispositive, but it does seem to be militating in the direction of Russia having done it. I mean, another issue here was that some of the claims cut both ways. They say that Russia built it, so they must have known exactly how to sabotage it. Well, it's been under Ukrainian control, so presumably the Ukrainians who've been running it in Ukraine for all of this time also had the engineering specs. That doesn't cut one way or the other.
What about these random third-party groups that are out there, doing Nord Stream, according to the thinking of the mainstream media for some time, although now we've moved apart from that. Maybe we don't know. It's just somebody.
Right, and it is frustrating because there was also some evidence that wasn't really dealt with initially after the dam was damaged. There was some conflicting evidence based on who was most poorly affected by the consequences of the dam. It has negative consequences for Crimea, which is under Russian control. Some questions about whether or not one would execute a sort of own goal like this just to hurt Ukrainians. And this is obviously, the implications of this are significant because it is a huge attack on infrastructure, a kind of crime against humanity, resulting in a lot of deaths. And it's an environmental crime, towns underwater and the like. And so it's part of the broader conversation about who's really the bad guy here, which I do think kind of misses the point. People who want to end the war in Ukraine aren't doing so because they think that Putin is good, or an action like this, if executed by the Russians, is justified or good or something that anybody should support. I mean, human lives are being lost here throughout the context of this war because of actions on both sides. That's why so many people want to stop the war. And there's a kind of acknowledgement that all wars end at the negotiating table. And are we actually supporting better outcomes by extending the war, or are there American interests that are out of step with Ukrainian interests here that are prolonging a war? And we've seen several instances of efforts to negotiate that America and the UK have scuttled, and that's what's led people to want to object to this conflict. And so sometimes I think the blame game around moments like this have an outsized importance.
Sure.
Not that the implications of having done something this grievous aren't serious and real, and that there doesn't need to be accountability at some point. But it feels a little bit like almost a gotcha when something like this is described to be because of the Russians. And I don't think it really affects people who want to end the war's perspective on things.
And I do have to say, I mean, be careful how I say this. The claim, so there are a lot of experts quoting their engineers saying, no, this dam was built really well. It's not going to just come apart because there was, continuous explosions near it for a long period of time. I'm not in any position to independently agree or disagree with those. I have no idea. And they're quoting experts who say that. I know that in the U.S., our infrastructure crumbles sometimes. Sometimes bridges that were presumably supposed to have been well-made collapse. There was just one in...
I took the train to Philadelphia for reasons.
Yes, exactly. And nobody who built a piece of public infrastructure ever says, yeah, I really screwed that one up. It's not made very well. Don't blow on it too hard. They always say, no, I did a great job. Governments do cut corners, not like all over the world when it comes to building things.
This dam was in a war zone, getting damaged by both sides for a year.
So again, I'm not trying to jet fuel can't melt steel beams this at all. If that's what blew it up, that's fine. I am totally willing to believe the Russians blew it up. They're invading a country. They shouldn't be doing that. Vladimir Putin is bad. I don't agree with what they're doing at all. People are dying. Bad. They could absolutely have done this. I'm not so, maybe this is, again, COVID craziness now, or so. I don't so immediately go, oh, well, don't worry. Experts say there's no way this thing could have just gradually succumbed to the wear and tear of the war zone around it. So that couldn't have happened.
Well, even the New York Times article acknowledges that could have happened, even if it's relatively unlikely in that person's estimation. Right.
And we're trying to weigh, what's the more likely thing? Experts really say this one, but again, not at all, not trying to question this narrative here or something. It's just... my skepticism rears its head when I have to hear too many experts say.
Well, it's also worth noting that in the AP coverage of this, they do the thing that so often happens in these news reports where they cite for evidence information from a senior American intelligence official who spoke on condition of anonymity. Okay, so once again, we have a source that has a obvious perspective or bias built into what they do professionally.
For sure.
Who's also been granted anonymity, so there isn't even an opportunity to interrogate that person or the basis of their knowledge. That is not helping the culture of skepticism around news events ranging from Ukraine to COVID to now, thanks, RFK Jr. autism and all of the stuff that's resurfacing. There used to be higher standards, many journalists say, to when you would grant anonymity to sources. And the volume of times that this sort of thing happens, particularly in these kind of national security type stories, is concerning. That's, again, not dispositive, but it is concerning. And I'm sure we'll continue to follow this story as more people weigh in and more evidence potentially trickles in over time. More Rising after this.